in ZANU-PF is a manifestation of the weakest link that we have on the opposition. Because if we had a strong, a better alternative, a firebrand, a formidable opposition like the one we used to have in 1999, like the one that wrestled power from Mugabe in 2008, then the guys in ZANU-PF wouldn't have time to coalesce, to group against each other, as has been the case right now. So factionalism in ZANU-PF is actually a manifestation of a disintegrated opposition. Because the good thing about factionalism in ZANU-PF is that it works to their advantage because its grassroots is not fighting. ZANU-PF supporters, they don't fight each other. They have not yet reached a level where they are labeling themselves pro-Lacoste, pro-G40. They are just ZANU-PF supporters. That's why you still see amazing crowds whenever the president is having a rally, despite that it's a party that is rigged by factionalism. So the factional dynamics are happening at the elitist level, at the top, but at the grassroots, which matter in politics more than the elites, it's intact. So the opposition needs now to re-oil its grassroots because right now it's not there. It needs to be reactivated, re-energized. That is not taking place. So you have an elitist ZANU-PF that is fighting each other, yet its grassroots is active, it's still there. On the other hand, you have an opposition whose grassroots you can't really tell whether it's still in existence because there hasn't been much in terms of visibility, reactivation, and enthusiasm of that grassroots. So factionalism in ZANU-PF won't have anything to do with the dynamics of the politics of the day, because whatever faction prevails in ZANU-PF is going to take charge of Zimbabwe for now.
Changarai would though say that they've united under a new coalition and that they're starting to activate themselves. Would you say that coalition is strong and sustainable?
Yeah, Morgan Tsvangirai cannot be ruled out, cannot be dismissed in as much as political dynamics of Zimbabwe are concerned, because it was Tsvangirai who demystified Mugabe's power back in 1999. It's only Tsvangirai who proved to Zimbabwe and the world that Mugabe can be challenged and Mugabe can be removed. That's why we had a GNU from 2009 to 2013. It was because of that. So that political CV alone cannot be ruled out, cannot be undermined. But put it in this context, there have been problems within the MDC party. Within the MDC, you look at the appointment of 2 additional vice presidents. That alone didn't augur well with the party, didn't augur well with the certain sections of the party who were followers of Tsvangirai. Then you also have now this very same party entering into memorandum of understandings with other equally important political groupings within Zimbabwe, but without first coming to terms to agree on their own. So that disgruntlement, that discord is very silent, but it's very visible, especially in the press, when you hear conflicting statements, especially now on social media, where there is no longer monopoly of information from a certain institution or from certain individuals. So that is very costly. But as long as Tsvangirai is still there, as long as Tsvangirai is still alive, I think he has proved all and sundry that he can give ZANU-PF and Mugabe a lot of sleepless nights.
How do you think the international community are watching all of this and kind of looking forward to the next election?
I think the international community is out of this game. I think there has been a fatigue in as much as Zimbabwe's transition is concerned. There is an international community fatigue. There is also an national fatigue where even the people are fed up of the political scenario in ZANU-PF. The firebrand international community, which would call Mugabe to order, is also tired. You look at the regional grouping SADC, it's also equally tired. You look at the African Union, it's also equally tired. So the international community is not going to play any role. The destiny of Zimbabwe is going to be changed by Zimbabweans. So the international community is out of this game. And the international community now also gives credibility to ZANU-PF, which ZANU-PF desperately needs, because the moment the international community is on top of its voice, you find that it gives credit to Mugabe's claims that you are meddling, you are tampering with Zimbabwe's sovereignty, etc. So the international community is out of the equation. Yes, any meaningful political dispensation must have a blessing, but more or less an appeal to the international community's cause. But in this game, it's Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans who are going to determine and decide their course. That's why the focus is more inside than outside.
Can you just explain for an international audience the whole issue of land reform? It seems, I mean, Mugabe mentions it every time he speaks, and it seems to be a kind of electoral hot issue as well. And the MDC also support it. Could you just kind of unpick, what the popular support is for land reform, and why the two parties agree on it?
Yeah, when you are looking at the land reform in Zimbabwe, the issue of land, the land question, it has remained a case of unfinished business. You can backdate to 1890, the arrival of white settlers in Zimbabwe, the dispossession that took place thereafter of indigenous people, that land being used to compensate the pioneer column, the hired men by Cecil John Rhodes, to come and occupy and colonize Zimbabwe. So you fast forward to 1979, when the Lancaster House conference was being deliberated, which gave birth to the independence of Zimbabwe. One of the sticking issues was that of a national constitution that would be used. So from the onset, Zimbabwe's constitution was discussed, debated, deliberated at Lancaster and not in Zimbabwe. And the issue of land, Zimbabwe was very silent on about the issue of land. Yes, it was contentious, but the Lancaster House protected, gave privilege to the white settlers that no, if a government wants to take land, it can only do so through the willing buyer, willing seller principle, meaning that the government could not voluntarily conscript, voluntarily reallocate the land belonging to white commercial farmers to the rest of the entire citizenry or nation. So the land reform firstly was a case of unfinished business in 1980 with the coming of independence, because with the coming of independence, the land issue became very, very silent. It only re-emerged in 2000 when Mugabe was facing his real threat, which happened not to be the opposition, by the way, but a clique, a grouping of the war veterans who 20 years taking a stock of their gains of the liberation struggle were saying no, only a few elites are benefiting at our expense, yet we went to war together. You promised us A, B, C, D. So the opposition capitalized on that and said, you war veterans, you are claiming that you fought Zimbabwe, but you don't have land. You are squatters in your own country. So that's how this whole issue of Jambanja's land violence manifested, because it had to be done that way, otherwise there won't be Mugabe to talk about right now. So the land became a critical weapon ZANU-PF used. So it's a noble cause that was done, embarked haphazardly, to the extent that to this day there are no real meaningful dividends that have been realized on the land reform, because it was politicized the way distribution took place. Because you cannot say the land was not supposed to be politicized. Yes, land is political. There is an organic link between livelihood, between sovereignty, between statehood and the land. So by and large, the land reform can only be addressed through the law, through ownership, which is not there right now. Because if you say you have a 99-year lease, that's legally incompetent, because you cannot guarantee that for 99 years I'm going to own a farm. So what is happening right now is that all land is state land in Zimbabwe, and you cannot guarantee anyone to be an owner of land which happens to be state land unless there are title deeds. As long as there are no title deeds, there is no ownership to talk about. And land will continue perpetually to be a political tool, because he who gives can also take away. So if I give you land on the pretext that it is state land, the very same people who preside over the state, what it means, they have power to repossess that land. So unfortunately, that's the scenario in Zimbabwe. We cannot talk about a land reform when there is not a legal framework that genuinely addresses who owns land, that genuinely addresses property rights, and that genuinely addresses the issue of legality to preside on that land through issuance of title deeds.
Are we seeing that repossession happen in a more accelerated way since Mugabe said the remaining white farmers have to be evicted? Have you seen an increase in cases?
Yeah, the increase will be there in a way, but you look at the focus of the land right now. ZANU-PF is too busy with these factional dynamics. In fact, the case that Zimbabwe has is that there is really nothing which ZANU-PF starts which will end. There is a problem of stillbirth in each and every program, especially coming from the state. You now hear of command agriculture, but because it has been connected or linked to a certain faction in ZANU-PF, the whole issue of command agriculture is just fizzled out. You no longer hear about it, you no longer read about it in the press. So there hasn't been spontaneous, continuous land dispossessions as of yet following President Mugabe's statement. But what I can tell you is that there's been expansion of the First Lady's ventures in agriculture, which also managed to disadvantage other people, especially in Manzoe farm, where she's expanding her ventures within agriculture, which now affect villagers who have to be dispossessed, removed, and reallocated elsewhere.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome.